Okay, so we are going to discuss today on the RDS. So how many of you worked on the database side? At least know what the database is, how does it work, why actually we use databases? No? Okay, I'm sure you must have used Excel, right? Surely.
I used
And
a database, like a different type of database, couple of times
Hmm.
because I'm actually doing big data, and I think I actually used AWS also for a database. So
Hmm. Yeah. So others might have used Excel already, right? In the Excel,
I
what do you
use
see? Hmm.
I
Mongo to
think
MongoDB.
SQL is database, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like queries, little.
Uh-huh. So you would have seen Excel, right? So Excel, I'm sure everyone would have seen it. So in Excel, what do we see? So we see the columns and then we see the rows, right? So the same way, the database which we are going to discuss now, that is called relational database system, consists of data in this format. So if we talk about an operating system, so if you want to copy the files, save the files, or edit the files, so you have to follow the format called NTFS or ext4, the file system formats, those are. But here to store the data and retrieve the data, you also need a format, right? So that format is going to be a table format. That is what database mostly uses, mainly relational database systems. Okay, so they store the information in a rows and the columns. So let's suppose, so we are trying to store, we started a company and now we wanted to store the information of our employees. So how do you store the information? So you can store in a document as well, like you put the employee name, their age, their department, their address. You can also use some other formats as well, but what is the best and quick format? The table format. Like you can also mention, so you are going to have the headers, you say employee name, you can say first name, last name, age, salary, and address, right? And you can also have your ID, employee ID. So in the row section, so you can put whatever his name is, like this, right? So now if you want to know, oh, sorry, if you want to know the employee who is 102 salary, so how do you get it? So you have to go to the salary section first, and then you need to get the data of 102. So this and this matching at this location. So this is the data will be retrieved. So this is the way the table actually used in a databases to store the data information, right? That is called the data. This is the data. So you are storing this data, that is called database, right? So like this, you might be having another table, right? Another table, it can be ID. You will put his department and when he date of birth and his joining date. So the employee ID, you are going to put 101. Department is going to be HR. Date of birth on X and joining date is Y. 102 employee, finance team Z. Date of birth is K. So now, do you see the link between this table and this table? Do you see the link? What is the link?
Yes. ID.
ID. So ID is actually a link here, right? So this is called, so this table and this table is now having some link. So they are related. That is called the relational database system. So now there is a link between two different tables. That's why it becomes a relational database system. Okay. So in database systems, we always encourage that you break the data into like a meaningful data, like you have a table. So if you talk about an employee table, so you can use one table with all the fields in it, all the columns, but it becomes huge table, right? So we always wanted to keep the table for the purpose of the table only. So if this table name is employee information, it will have only employee information. So this table is going to provide the details of the department. So I need to join these two tables with one column, one same column, so that I can link these two. I can also put the F name, last name, and the age here, but it becomes duplicate data, right? So we want to avoid that. There is also some normalizations like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 normalizations are there. That's in-depth topic. We don't need all this. So for a DevOps engineer, you don't need to know all this. You just need to know the database contains a table format where you can store the data. The data will be stored like this. So if you want, like I'm talking about a RDBMS, okay, relational database management system. So if you want to get the information of a person's salary, then the query is going to be like this. Select what you want to do, salary, from table. Which table? It can be a employee table where ID is equal to 102. This is going to be a query, a select query. So do you run this against database? To log into database, you need login credentials. You perform login to database and then you run this query. So what it does, selects salary from, it's going to give the salary from this table. Now, if you want to get the information of the data, you want to print the date of birth and the first name as well. Then again, you need to query the two tables. Select F name, comma, date of birth from employee table alias as E, and this department table D, where E dot ID is equal to D dot ID and E dot ID is equal to 102. If
You
you
can
break
use
it down,
join, right?
huh?
If you're trying to extract from different table, you can use join, right?
Yes, yes, and it becomes difficult. So I'm just giving you sample that you can understand easily what I'm doing here. So I'm trying to select F name from this table, DOB, date of
So
birth.
we can write all this here only, or
No, no, we
we
don't,
will
we
write
don't, we
in
don't, we
database,
don't.
right?
Yeah, we generally don't query databases. We
Oh,
only set up
okay.
the database. I'm
Okay.
just giving you some example how database works. That's it.
Okay.
As a DevOps engineer, you may not work on all these, but
Okay.
it depends. So we don't know,
So
right?
if we, yeah, if we little if we know, we can work on that. I mean, like
Yes.
in the database, we should write all these, right? Select salary, some table name.
No, we
No, actually,
I
you don't write in database. This is for like a kind of extracting information from database. You don't need to write in a database. This is querying, like if you want to get some information, then you can use this. But writing database is different.
so this is how you query it. So I'm going to query the first name, date of birth from employee table and gave an alias name as E, department table as a D. I'm joining. So where E dot ID. So this ID and this ID should match, and the ID should be 102. So it is going to query F name. It picks up the F name and then it picks up the date of birth. So from these two tables where employee ID and DDM should match. So 101, 101, 102, 102 is matched. And then E dot ID is equal to 102. So I'm going to get only this ID. So I'm going to print the first name and this thing. That is how the database work in behind. The query may be different based on the SQL database we are using, SQL database we are using. It can be MySQL, it can be SQL Server, it can be a MS SQL. So we have so many database servers we have, and we also have a Aurora as well, right? So this is a typical, a small brief introduction of the table structure, how it is going to be in the database. So we don't need to worry about all this. It's just like a add-on information for you guys. Okay, so now let's go ahead and discuss about database. So before that, let me give you some information how actually database and why do we use this. Okay, so
Excuse me, Lokesh.
uh-huh,
Like in AWS, we actually only like create instance of a database, right? And then
right,
like what I did previously was I created instance of database in AWS and then actually accessed it from using Oracle.
hmm
So is it always the case like we use only that instance and then access it from another like Oracle or MySQL or something like
right,
that?
right. So database is going to be on the hard disk. It stores the data in a table format, right? So if you want to access the data that is stored inside a database, again, we need to have a client. So database is a server. So we can log into the server, but we don't see it format, right? It's in which format it is stored. So to see that, we need to query the database. So query means asking for the information. So when you ask for the information, it has to be in a format. So now if I speak in Nepal language, you may understand, but how about the other people in the class? They don't know, right? Why? Because they know, they can hear, but they cannot understand what I am saying. So again, I need to have a translator in between. If I speak in Nepal, it converts into English to them so that they can easily understand. This is the same way we have SQL client in between. So SQL client or SQL developer, whatever the client we have, you write the query. I want this, 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 and then you execute against the database. Then database read that instructions and then query the database accordingly, and then you give you the data back. So we will discuss on all this. Okay. So let's discuss about our typical application anatomy. Okay, if I am an architect, so how am I going to create my website? Okay, so I have a website which is a e-commerce site. So I'm going to sell some goods. Okay, so we have a Diwali, right? So Diwali is coming, so I'm going to sell some diyas and some items. So for that, I need to first start have website. Okay, I need to have website, right? So I am good. Then what is about the items I am going to store? So if it is static website, I can launch HTTPD, but now I'm going to keep some items in my database, retrieve the data, give it to the user. So once they make the payment, store the payment information, order information, and everything, right? So for that, I need to use a database. I have two options here typically. So I can use a load balancer. So again, I need to scale my application, right? So I'm going to have the VM1, VM2. So in case data is gone, I can still have another VM running, right? So data. So I need to store the data in a database, right? So database, it can be anything. So typically I can store the data on the machine itself here, right? Now, what is wrong with this? The approach. So with this approach, the wrong is, so if someone X accessed, he created some order, okay? He purchased the product. So initially he connected to this VM and the data is stored here, okay? Now he wanted to cancel the item. So when he again logs in, now the request has gone to this VM. So can he see his information here? No, because the data when he purchased, it is stored in a VM1, but now his session has gone to VM2, so there is inconsistency. This is not a typical structure of using the application, because when someone accesses the application, the data should be always sync. So he should be getting the same data whenever he logs into the application, right? So this is a bad structure. So what is the best structure? The best structure is we are going to use a load balancer, and then we are going to use a multiple VMs, and then we are going to set up a database for us. So in this case, I am going to use a load balancer, which is the elastic load balancer, and then I have my application, and then I am going to create a database here. This is my application. So how it is going to help? So now if some user access my data, okay, so he will be connected to here, but the data will be stored here. So next time when he logs in, his session may go here, but the data will be coming from here, so he can see same data. So it means, so these are becomes application data, application VM, app VMs. You can also call web. Sorry. Oh, sorry guys. So you can call app or web. So this becomes your data. So now, even though I create one more VM here, I scale my VM. So this contains only app layer, but the data is actually coming from here. So when I say app layer, you log into Amazon.com, right? So when you log into Amazon.com, you search for something, you get the results. So where are those results are stored actually? The data is stored in the database. So when you look for a light, it will query the database and get the results and give it to your session. So application layer is just going to give you a layer where you can do the UI operations, only UI operations. So when you click the button, it actually in behind executes a query. That query will talk to database. Then database provide response with the results, and that results are again shown back to you in the UI. So UI is just like a translator or the mediator, that's it. Because the data, everything is stored in the database, right? That is fine, but how am I going to get the results from the Amazon database? I can write the query, but I need the logins. Even though if they give the login, I don't know how to query it, where they have stored it, right? So that's why when designing the application, they have an application VM where you just have the application layer running, and the entire data is actually coming from the database. That is what a typical structure, right? Now in this is the good scenario. So this is working fine, perfectly fine. So now we have a load balancer here. So if this VM goes down, we still have other two VMs running successfully, and the database is also working fine. Okay. Now all of a sudden this got crashed. Now what happens? So your entire data is gone. So you might be hearing some news like data compromised, someone sold the user data information to someone else, like that. So recently Facebook, I mean, couple of years back, right? So what happens if the data has got crashed? So you lose all the data. You don't have any information now. So you can't even log in now. The reason behind is even your login credentials are stored inside the database, that you are an active account and you have a Amazon subscription. Now what happens here? Data is gone, right? So again, this is a bad scenario, right? So the data can be lost. So when an architect designing the application, he always thinks that his application crashes. His application can be hacked. He can lose the data at any time. So if he thinks in these points, then he can come up with a better design. So what is a better design? So it will be this. Clear. So now I am going to create the load balancer. Same. I have my VMs here, and this is the database. Is the structure, which is good. Now what he does is, so he's going to create the backup of this database. Backup of this database. So now what is happens here? So Amazon provides you the flexibility. Okay. So to access the database, again, you need to have an endpoint that is called the IP address or the DNS name that you can reach to database. Now, if you want to reach to your VM, we always use the IP address, right? So similarly, if you also want to access the database, you also need to have an IP or the DNS endpoint. So that DNS endpoint, they will be given when you create the database. So this becomes primary and this becomes secondary. You always have one database up and running. So this, the secondary one, will be a standby, because whenever someone writes some information, okay, some user has created some data here. So immediately this data will be synced to this secondary. So within a fraction of seconds. The moment someone writes data here, so like someone makes an order, its order means he's storing the data permanently in his account. So that information will be stored immediately into the secondary database as well. Okay. So all of a sudden, if something goes wrong, with this database, then you always have the secondary database, right? Then Amazon, they have a service. The moment primary goes down, then it will immediately route the traffic. So now these VMs will talk to these guys automatically. Secondary. So now whatever data he has written in the primary is already copied into secondary, right? So he will see the same data. Whatever data was here, he can also see the same information in secondary also. So there is no loss. This is called the primary and the secondary. This is called the multi-site, because now we have database in two different, right? This is availability zone 1, and this can be 2. If one completely gone down, so we have data coming from 2 as well. So this is like a typical scenario. So you may trust because maybe you are actually using the like accounts, Bank of America accounts. So the data is very crucial here, right? So there is a potential chance that even this location also goes down. Then what do we do? Everything data is gone, right? So to avoid that, they also maintain multiple copies and the backups, everything. So now I have database running from multiple locations, and I'm going to take the backup of my database every day. So they have a full backup, which you can take every week, and they have incremental backup, which you can take daily, and they have a transactional backup. Transaction backup means whenever someone make a transaction, so in the database we call transaction. In the Linux machine, if you execute a command, it becomes a process, right? The process can be short-lived or long-lived. If it is long-lived, it becomes a service. If it is short-lived, it dies immediately. We don't even see the process ID. In databases, we call it as a transaction. So transaction means it can be a read operation or write operation. It becomes a transaction. So all the transactions also backed up. So that's what the database, multi-site, and the replications. So the data from primary to secondary will always happens in a synchronous manner. Synchronous means the moment you write in primary, it will immediately be replicated to secondary with no time, fast. So there is no data loss. Okay, that is called the synchronous operations. Clear? Any doubts on this?
Excuse me, Lokesh.
Mhm.
In real world scenario, like a company actually maintain like store user data like login and financial information separately than other data, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then like in case of database like that, those transactions, what happens is like they create an image. I forgot the actual name. So just that image will update, and once in a day or like in a certain period the actual database will get updated, right?
No, it will be immediate. There is no image like that.
No, like I forgot the actual word. What, I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah. So this in typical scenario. So if you are an application, right? So you just have whatever data is coming from your application. Then you will be writing directly the database. Okay. So again, database. So we are just talking about single database, right? So if you're talking about a big application like Facebook or Google or Amazon, so they have multiple databases. So each and every database will do one purpose. So one database will take care of user accounts, one database will have all the orders, one database will have something else as well. So it varies. So that how they design. So based on your application use, the architect architect of your application becomes difficult and too complicated. But we don't go into all those details. We are just talking about a typical application where we have a load balancer and you have multiple VMs to load your balances, and then data is being written into a database, right? So if database goes down, I need to have a backup. So I'm going to use a synchronous, multi-site database. So it is going to replicate the data automatically. So I may have a potential chances that I may lose both data. So I may also travel to previous data. Let's suppose I made some commit today. Commit means made the changes permanent database. Now I wanted to see what it was before. So again, I have to travel back to the previous. You can also go back if you have backups enabled. So now this is all good, perfect, working fine. So now again, architect will always thinks how I can improve my application. Okay. So if we talk about a typical scenario of our application, so where we have a load balancer here and the VM here and the VM here and the database here, right? So let's talk about your orders. Okay. So when you query some database, query means you're just looking for a information, you search for it. When you search for something, it is going to retrieve the data. So when you get the data retrieved, are you going to make any commits? Commit means changes. Let's talk about blocks. So don't forget this. Talk about the blocks or specifications, specification of the product. So you are looking for a product called light or maybe some phone. Let's talk about a Samsung phone. Okay. So before you purchase Samsung phone, you may look for the specifications of it, right? What are the specs of this? What is the camera? What is the GB? What is the CPU? What is the screen display size? What is the resolution? Everything. So this information is read information or the write information? Can you tell me?
It's read.
It's just read,
Reading the
right? You
information.
you are just reading the data. You're not doing anything with that. So here, then architect thinks, okay, now how can I effectively use my database? So in this database, so you would be having the database, right? And this is your offline database. This is primary and this is secondary. The data is being synced synchronously. Okay, so since this database is actually has all the data, so you need to protect this and keep it always available. Keep it always available. Okay, so what you are most concerned about this? If the information already available in the database and they are just seeing the data, like reading the specifications. for the reading, this data is available in the primary, right, and the secondary. So now you have many people reads the data, right, like specifications, and some people actually makes the data, that is one purchase. So if I really want to buy a phone, then I do the research first. So I log into Amazon.com, then open all the phones available for the prices, and then I compare each together. Then I look at the reviews, I look at their comments, I look at the pictures. So after spending at least 1-2 hours, then I make my decision, right? So in that case, so if I just want to purchase something, then I am going to make 100 reads operations and one write operation. So in both these two, which is very important, read operation or write operation for you as a
Read,
as a company hold, as a company.
read would be
So for the user, read is very important, right? But for the company, the write is important because the data he is committed, he has made some changes in my database, right? So I need to protect this properly. The read information is just like for the read. It is not the, even though uh, you don't have the data here, there is no impact, but this has a lot of impact. So if you made a purchase, your order, and that order is not showing up in your account, what does it mean? So he made a payment successfully, but after making the payment, he cannot see his order in his account. Then who is at the fault? Company is at the fault, right? Because he made a purchase, he had transaction ID, but it is not showing the orders. So if it is not showing in orders, it means it is not written on the database. If it is not written on the database, you lose the transaction. So you don't know whether that guy actually made purchase or not. How can you validate that? So if you say, no, I cannot see that information in my database, so you didn't make any purchase. So next time he don't log in Amazon.com. He says that I made payment, money has deducted, but I don't see the order. And the company claims that I did not make the purchase because they don't see the order information. So who is at fault here? Neither user nor company, because user sees that he has the data, whereas company sees that there is no data. So we get this kind of problem so many times. So that's why you need to keep your database, this database, so you need to keep the database like so sensitive. Like, so now, even though read operations will take some CPU loads, the write operation also create some CPU load, right? So now as an architect, so what I'm going to do, so I'm going to create another database here. This is called read replicas. So as name says, read replicas. I can say read replicas. So now what it happens, so I am going to sync the data to here one way, not two ways. This is called asynchronous. So the primary to secondary becomes synchronous, whereas primary to read replicas becomes asynchronous. The difference between these two is synchronous means it happens real time, immediately. Asynchronous means it happens with time delay. So now if someone makes a commit here in the primary database, so it may take couple of minutes to replicate to read replicas, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Now why we use the read replicas here? So now the read replicas will give you a flexibility of read operations. So now these guys are making 100 read operations, but only one write operation, right? So now what you can do, so whenever somebody looking for the specifications, then you are going to send their request to this database. So when they are trying to read the data like specification, the database, this database will be used. So when they try to make some order, then you will send that request to this guy, the write operations, because this field now separates. So now the main primary database now will be used for the write operations. So all the 100 read transactions, read operations are going to read replicas. So this database will now only perform the write operations. So less load on the CPU, less load on the memory. Perfect. Database, right? So you cannot ask the professor to teach the primary students, I mean the kindergarten students and the college students. So now you are keeping your professor to teach only the college students, and all the kindergartens will be taught by some other students, some other teachers. So you are effectively using your professor. That is what the difference between the primary, secondary, and the read replicas. So if we talk about a wiki, so I'm sure you would have read the Wikipedia, right? So 99 users out of 100 use Wikipedia for the read purpose. So only 1% of people use it for the write purpose, right? Write purpose. So now 99 users, when they're trying to read, so their connection will go to the read replicas. So when they click on the edit, when they click on the edit of the page, then that time transaction will go to the this database. The data will be same because whatever you have in primary is there in read replicas, right? So whatever you were seeing in a read mode, now you see the same information in the edit mode as well. But the only difference is the edit mode is now going to the primary database. So when you save it, the data will be stored in this database. So in this database, primary. So once he saves it, his connection still be here only. It depends upon how your architect designs it. So next time when someone uses logs in, again the same connection goes to read replicas. So this is a typical scenario of an application. So now we have first load balancer, and then we use auto scale groups so that my VM is scaled. And then I'm going to take a database in behind. My database has contained so much of information. So I'm going to enable the multi-site. I'll have primary and the secondary. So primary, secondary will be synced. So there is a potential chances that both locations may go down. So I enable the backups so that I can go back to previous history and also save my data backups. And then again, we have a read replicas. So what is read replicas? So read replicas are going to contain the information for the read operations so that it doesn't allow the write operations. The reason behind this, it is only one-way sync, right? So whatever you write in the primary will be copied over to read replicas. It is only for the read purpose. So you cannot edit the data in the read replicas. So if someone want to edit the data, then they have to perform in the primary database. So as a end user, I don't know all these. So when I click on the edit, where I'm going, when I just open it, where it is going, I don't know anything, right? So that everything is controlled by your architect behind the application. He designs it application. So this everything is designed by your architect. You don't need to worry about this. So what you need to worry about here is how to create a database, how to enable the backups. That's it. And how many read replicas they want. You don't need to worry about all this, but you should know why we use this. When they say, can you enable multi-site? So what is multi-site? Oh, it's like primary and secondary. That's fine. They may say, can you, I need 5 read replicas. So what is 5 read replicas? You don't know why we use it, but if you know why we use it, then you know it. If someone says that someone who doesn't have any knowledge in that team, he may architect say that, hey, can I get the database? Then you will ask, database is used for what purpose? It's a production. Okay, so what if the database goes down? What are your strategy? He say, no, I don't have any strategy. Then you can recommend. So can I enable the multi-site so that if primary goes down, secondary will be up and running? He says, yeah, perfect, fine. Then you'll ask him question. So do you need the backups? He said, what backups are? So backups will let you go back to previous history, and in case both sites are down, you can still recover that. That is called the backups. Okay, then again you can ask, do you have any chance of using read replicas? He say, what is read replicas? So that will limit the transactions. If you have 100 transactions happening in your database, so if 50 transactions are just read purpose, so you can route them to read replicas. The remaining you can route to the database. So that they will design. We don't know that. He say yes, then you can implement. If not, you can just ignore it. Okay, so let's now see in action how we are going to create the databases and then what's all about this. So let me clear this.
Lokesh, I'll just be back in like 2 minutes.
Sure. So now let's go back to our database. So I'm going to create the database now. Okay, so I'm in the Amazon RDS section, relational database system. So you can also say, I mean service, I think this is. So in typical you call RDBMS, relational database management system. So I go to dashboard. This is my dashboard. So this talks about Amazon Aurora database. So they have a lot of databases. So it's asking us to create the Amazon Aurora, or we can also create our own. Okay, so I'm going to create my own database. So it's asking for standard or easy create. So easy create means it will give all the options automatically, but we use standard because I want to walk through all the options. So I go standard create database. So now I have Amazon Aurora, MySQL, MariaDB, PostgreSQL, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. So you can choose any of these. So why there are so many databases? So there are some different. So MySQL will give you use enterprise and the community. MariaDB is also same purpose. Postgre is now widely used. Oracle is licensed, which is effective for the online transactions like trading and the banking or all this. Microsoft is offered by the Microsoft. Okay, so I use the MySQL. I use MySQL. You can use any database, no worries. So now I have a, you want to use community edition or you want to use the enterprise edition. I use the community one. What is the version? Again, MySQL has a version. So I by default, it chose 8.0.20. So they assume that this is the properly working one. Okay, I take the same one. Now templates. So they also have a template. So what type of template you want to create? You want to use for production or dev test or the free tier. So production means it will automatically give you an option to choose multi-tier, right? Dev test means it is going to give you only one primary because dev is not critical, right? Even though you lose the data, you can still just sync the data from the production after removing the critical confidential data information. And then free tier. Free tier is just for testing purpose. So I'm going to choose the free tier. Okay. And then settings. So you are going to give the database identifier. So I'm going to give the SUV identifier credentials. So what is the credentials you need to log into the database? Again, you need to have a credential. Is the admin credentials. I'm going to create one master password. So I would say auto generate. Yeah, it's going to generate the auto password automatically for me. And maybe let me give myself. Okay, so invalid password. Yeah, it's asking me to give all these details. Yeah. Now DB instance size. Again, we have the sizes in the VMs, right? Like T2 micro or C4 large and all. So we also have a database instance sizes here. So what the speed you want? So I chose the smaller one, right? So it's going to be T class. I'm going to choose there is no T2 micro, right? So I'm going to choose this one, which gives me 2 vCPU and 1 GB RAM. Why it is not letting me choose? So I choose include previous generation as well. Now it is giving me T2 micro. So because I chose this one, right, free tier. So we don't have the free tier in the current version. So I chose the previous generation version, which gives me 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM. Okay. And then storage. What is your storage? Again, database also needs storage, right? So it depends upon what type of data you are storing. So if you're storing plain text, like information, then you can choose any. So maybe 20. So this information, all this information will be given by the application team. We don't need to worry about all this. Okay. So they will ask you what is the production or dev or the free tier. Maybe they ask only for production or dev, and then they'll also give the password what they want to set. If not, you can set yourself, and then what type of storage they need, what is the speed they are expecting. So for a practice purpose, we can keep the 20. They have auto scaling as well. So auto scaling means in case you are running out of storage, then the AWS will automatically expand the storage. So this is the future. We can keep it as it is. Maximum threshold. So what is the threshold that you can scale up to? 25 GB is fine for me, just for testing purpose, right? You see, availability and durability is now disabled. This is called the multi-AZ, multi-replication, right? This is called the multi-AZ deployment. So where you have a primary in one location, secondary in another location, where the data will be synced synchronously between these two ends. So since we chose free tier, it is not giving us here. Okay, for the practice purpose, choose the free tier only, because otherwise you will end up paying money a lot. But you know the concept now, right? What is the multi-AZ means? And then connectivity, from which VPC or where I need to set this up. So here you need to be focused. So we always say that your database should always be in the private subnet, right? So here when you're choosing, you have to be specific. You should choose the private subnets and all everything. I choose the default VPC here, and then additional connectivity information. They're asking about public access. If you say yes, you can access your database publicly. So there is a huge chances of hacking your database, right? So I choose the no. Security group. So do you want to choose the security group where you can prevent, or you want to create the new one? So you can choose the default one which we have, but don't choose. You always create the new one for your databases. Okay. So database. So you see which availability zone you want to create. So you are going to choose the availability zone which you think is a private one. I choose this one at the moment. This is the port 3306. So this port number changes based on the database we are using. Okay, so we know SSH, right? SSH is 22, HTTPS is 443. So these are standard ports, right? So this is also a port, DB port, which way it uses to enter into the database. So it is 3306, which is good, no worries. And then database authentication. So this database authentication means, so this is different and that is different. So this credential settings, this talks about your admin account. There is a local account in the database that you can use to log in. And this authentication is asking for the users. Like if I am working in a technical team, so I'm development team, right? So I also need to see the data sometimes. So in that case, I don't want to give the admin account because this has a super privileges. So they can completely delete the data, right? So that's why we can also create the accounts here. So it's saying account, so authenticates using database passwords, or you want to use the IAM authentication. IAM means is the identity access management in AWS, which we are going to cover as well. I choose this. Password authentication is enabled at the moment. Additional configurations. So the initial database name. So we created the database server. Now I am going to create the database. So this is I am going to use for the sales. Let's say sales. Okay. And group parameter, optional group, everything is there. Backups. So backups are most important in the database, remember. So even though you have primary, secondary, it is highly recommended that you do the backups. Okay, so backups we have enabled. And also this database is actually a PaaS service. PaaS means platform as a service. So what they are going to do? So they are going to take a VM and then configure the database, whatever version we are asking. They install it, they create the user account, and they give you an IP address or the DNS endpoint to access it. So we are actually storing the data, right? But who is backing up those data? AWS. Who is maintaining of the patches of that VM? AWS. Who is actually adding the security patches or database version upgrades? AWS. We don't do all this. We just only use their service to store the data. It's called the PaaS service. So in the backup, we need to enable, and also we have a maintenance window as well. So when they want to perform the backups, when they want to perform the maintenance. Maintenance means now they have a VM on which they install the database server. Database server means nothing but the software, that's it. Database server. So they want to do the patches. So when is the best time that they can do the patches? When they do the patches, there is a small amount of downtime is expected. It's not mandatory, but expected. So if you have multi-AZ, then they will replicate the data to secondary. If you don't have the secondary, then they have to take the maintenance downtime that is expected. So what happens now? So you will provide the database timing. So I want every Sunday 12 p.m. you can do the maintenance, because other Sunday 12 p.m. I don't have many users accessing my application. So that's the maintenance window. The backup windows you give here. Okay. So it says backup, automatically backups. Okay. Keep the data for how many days? Retain for 7 days, 6 days, 5 days. I keep it 5 days. So select window. So no preference means whenever they want, they can do. But if you prefer select window, you can choose when you want to take the backups. This is the important. Okay. You give the proper one. So it says 12 o'clock night UTC time for half an hour. So monitoring, enable monitoring. So it's always recommended that you enable the monitoring for your database. The reason behind is so it can see how many transactions are happening, how many reads are happening, how many writes are happening on your database. So if your database is too much is being used, performing so many transactions, then based on that, you can increase the capacity. That's why you need to enable. And then log exports. What are these log exports are? So of course, so when we talk about database, when your application trying to connect your database, it may get the errors sometimes, right? Or maybe when you query your table, one table and another table, when you're querying, it may have some errors, right? So where you want to store all those errors. So you want to store all those errors in separate place. That is called the log exports. So you can do the S3 bucket or anywhere, so that you will have the data. So in our previous example, one user made a transaction, he purchased the order, but he can see the order in his screenshot. He has the tracking ID, order ID, but you don't have that information in the database. So where you can see, you will see in the logs, because there could be some error when writing the data. There could be some logs on the database, right? Deadlocks. That's why I didn't write it. So that information you can see in the logs. Now you will see that there is a write operation happened by this user for this order ID, and it failed to write to database. So it's a legitimate. So now you will identify that problem. You make that entry manually. you inform the user saying that now it is visible, right? So you may have seen this issue sometimes, not with the Amazon or maybe some other sites. You may say, I did this, but it's not coming. Then they'll fix it in behind. This is what they do in behind. Okay. And then IAM role, it creates automatically. This is a maintenance window that we have spoken. And then delete protection. So this is also important. So some people may accidentally delete the databases, right? So if they do, your entire data is gone. So you can also protect the enable. This is for the productions only. Dev test, it's up to you. So now monthly cost, it is giving us the cost information. If you create with this configurations, what is your price is going to be? So we chose all the basic ones. So I also don't want the backups because for testing purpose, right? And then monitoring is disabled. Yeah, it's they can do whenever they want. I don't mind. And and that's it. Yep. So let's go ahead and create database. So remember, we did not choose the multi-AZ, okay? And we don't even have the read replicas. So read replicas you can see from the Aurora database. If you try to create Aurora database, then you will see those options. So this will take some time for the database creation. This is. So as a DevOps engineer, what you will do, you click on the create database. So you get the form here, right? So whatever form you are seeing here, you ask those questions. So which database you want me to create? What is your production or the dev or test? So what is the database name? And then do you have any admin credentials you want me to set? Or which VPC you want me to create? What is the availability zone? And then what is your backup maintenance windows? That's it. This is the only a DevOps engineer's work. So whatever we discussed so far about the Excel sheet, that is for the knowledge purpose. And whatever I have shown you in the Blackboard, it is like a information to have a good information for a DevOps engineer. Okay. So it will take some time. So meanwhile, what we can do, so we'll take a break. We'll come at 9:15, and then we will continue further. We may not access query database. It's just like this information only. But DevOps engineer, you don't need to log into the database and do the transactions. That will be taken care by your application team. Okay. Okay, we will take a break and we'll come at 9:15. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So now database is got created. So we see this endpoint. So by using this, we connect to database. So now we have a port 3307, right? So now we need to go ahead and edit our connection so that the database can be accessed. Okay. So that is what about the database. So currently machines from these subnets can access because we have opened under this VPN security group. Da, 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 da. Yeah, proxies, all this blah blah. So it's good. So now we database created, we just give this endpoint to our application team and this port. This is what we do as part of DevOps engineer. Okay, so you may do some different as well based on the role that you are going to play in the company when you join. So typically, if someone asks you to create the database, this is the structure. So now let's go ahead and start on the another service called S3. So what is S3? I'm sure you might have seen this or heard this. S3 is a simple storage service. S3 stands for. So why do we use this? I think Amazon has started the first service as this only, S3 only, I think. Okay. So what is this S3 and why do we use this? Okay, so now let me go back to the Blackboard. So why do we use the S3? So S3 is like a storage. So now you have your Google Drive, right? You have Google Drive, and you have iPhone also has a Dropbox, and you have a OneDrive. So what are all these? These are all the storage devices. So even Amazon provides you the S3. So why it is called S3? Because the S3 is simple storage service they have created, and this S3 you can also use it to integrate with any other services in the AWS. So now you have a EC2 service, right? So in the EC2 means what? You have a machine. Okay. So once you create the EC2 box, you run your application. Okay. So now your application is going to generate some logs. So those logs are very crucial for you. So you can store those logs in the S3. Okay. Or maybe you have your company. This is your company. Let's assume. Okay. So in this company, you might be having many people, right? In the organization. So to make them access a unique place, you are going to create a S3 and you are going to create the folders. And then you can assign the persons who can access this data. You can also do that. So in the S3, so let's talk about one typical bank application. Okay, so bank information, they need to keep the transactions of your account. So if you have a bank account, okay, how often you verify the transactions? So maybe at the end of the month, you may check every day, or you may check once in a month, at the end of the month, once in a quarter. So you want to verify the transactions, right? Maybe some people do at the end of the year as well. So have you ever thought of going back to your previous transaction that you have made back in 2010? It case based. So what are the chances? 2%, right? So now I have the data in S3. So all those transactions, of course, they are transactions stored in the database. Okay. Let's example, they are storing in the S3. Okay. So you can keep all that information in the S3. Or maybe let's assume statements. So monthly statements. So not the transactions, monthly statements. So monthly statements are generated in a PDF format, right? So where you can click and download the statements. So how often you go and click the statements? At the end of the month, or end of the quarter, or half yearly, or yearly. So can you go back to previous history? Yes, I may go back, but how often? I don't know. It's rare. It can be once in a year, or once in a 4 years. We don't know, but less transaction. So what are the frequent transactions? Monthly statements. Everyone downloads their monthly statements every month, right? So in the S3, they also have a tiers. They have a tiers. Tier means frequently accessed data, infrequently accessed data, like archives and all this. So what are all these? So these are all like the tiers they have. So first tier talks about your frequently accessed data. So how frequently you access your data? That is the first thing. So now whatever data you store in this tier, so they are accessible immediately. So like you click the current statement, it downloads immediately. So when you are trying to retrieve the previous, like 2010's statements, so it will take some time to download. The reason behind is, so this information are rarely used. So this information is not required to make it accessible frequently. So you can keep it in a different tier. You can keep infrequently accessed tier. So this is frequent, so which is charged $10, and this may be less frequent. So this is charged $5, like this. So they have a tiers. So now you have 10 years of old data. Okay. So does company need to maintain the 10 years of old data? Yes or no? So maybe there is a US government policy says that whatever transactions we make, we have to keep the records for at least last 10 years. So audit may or may not happen, but we need to maintain that. If audit happens, then we should provide the details to auditors. If audit doesn't happen, then we are good, right? But we still need to maintain data. So that data is not being accessed at all. No one uses that. It's only for the audit purpose. So in that case, we don't need to store neither infrequent nor infrequent. So we can archive them. So archive means storing in a different location. So this will be retrieved upon demand. So if you need it, you put a request, they will retrieve the data for you. That is called the archive. Okay. So now let's see what do we have in the S3 here and how it is going to work. So I'm going to clear the thing. So I'm going to S3 bucket now. Okay, I'm going to create the bucket. This is called the bucket. So bucket means this is like an object storage. So you cannot mount this volume to the VM. So like you have a EBS volume, right? So you can mount that information, mount that data disk to your VM. But whereas bucket, you cannot. You can only perform copy and paste. So now I'm creating a bucket. So this bucket should uniquely be identified. It should be a unique name. So if I use something like this bucket name, but already used by someone else. So that's why I don't get that. It has to be a unique name. So I'm going to create a unique name, probably like this. And then I'm going to choose North Virginia. So copy setting from bucket. So I don't have any. So block all public access. What is this? So when we try to download, the S3 bucket, right? So you have an option. So this is in cloud, right? So you can access anywhere from the internet, or you can make it only accessible to your company networks. So this is talking about public access. You want to block the public access. So no one will access this data. I would make it yes, block all public access. So if I don't block this, what are the options I have? So block public access to bucket. Okay, block access to bucket, access control list. This is called the, you can also grant the access control list to specific users, specific machines, specific ranges as well. Okay, and there are so many options are available how you want to block. So let's block it everyone. Public access. The bucket versioning. What is the bucket versioning? So this bucket will give you an option to version. So let's suppose you have created one txt file that has some data. So your user has overwritten that. Maybe let's say Excel data. So Excel, you are maintaining the employee information and their salary. Okay. So someone else having access to this, he has overwritten the Excel data. So now you want to see the previous data, what it was before. So if you have this versioning enabled, it will keep a version whenever a new change is made. This is a good feature if you really wanted to go back to your history. So this is chargeable. So don't enable this. So if you are doing a free tier, don't enable this. Okay. And then we have tags. So you can add the tags name. You can choose my SUV bucket. So default encryption, again encryption. So now we are keeping data in S3. So how do you want to make it accessible? So you want to encrypt the data or disable it. So if you choose the encryption, they'll charge. If it disable, they don't charge. So this is for testing purpose. I am disabling this. Let's see additional settings. So object lock, store objects using the write once, read many. So write once, read many. So so if two persons are trying to edit the same file, then what happens? So which file, which transaction it has to store. So in the database, we call it blocks, process blocks. So when two operations trying to edit the same data, then the database doesn't know to whom to allow. That is called database locks. So here also we have a locks. If two persons trying to edit the data, what should I do? So here we are saying that write only once, read many. So if somebody trying to write the access, only allow one person to access it. This is what it is. If you enable it, of course they charge it, just disable this. Okay. and then create the bucket. So now we got the bucket created, which is called this name. This is uniquely identified. Okay, so if I open this, I have again so many options here. Okay, so this option. Now let's go ahead and upload some data. So I'm going to, this is the upload option I have here. You can also create folders as well. Maybe I'll create the folder first. So folder name. So I'm going to create a folder called HR server encryption. So we didn't want to encrypt it. Just create this folder. HR folder is created. I'll create another folder, finance, create the folder. So in the HR folder, I'm going to upload one document. So maybe I'll create one file quickly. Maybe I have this data anyway. So let me store this information. Come on. So I would say I have this Excel sheet. I just saved it, right? So I'm going to upload this. Add files. So file is uploaded. So created. So now I have the one XLS file in the directory. This is how you use this. Okay. So now we can also use the same S3 service in the from the machine as well. So how do we access this S3 from the machine? So let's see this. So now I'm going to launch a machine. I use Amazon Linux because it comes by default AWS CLI installed. It will take some time. So while this is creating, so let me generate the secret keys for my account. Okay, so you don't need to do that, but I just wanted to show you. So I'm going to open up another session. So I'm going to create a user in the AWS. So for that, I'm going to use the service. Come on, man. IAM, Identity Access Management. I go to users, add user. I would say its name. I'm going to choose a programmatic access. I'll tell you, I will explain this again when you work on the IAM. Okay, I'm going to create the group as well. S3 full access. I'm going to choose Amazon S3 full access privileges. I need to copy this information. So I just close this. I'm going to, so my machine is running. So let me log in to this box. So this is the public address. I'm into the box. So I'm checking whether AWS CLI is installed or not. So it is installed because I chose the Amazon Linux. So they have AWS already installed in those VMs. So I got the AWS. So I'm going to configure this AWS configure. It's talking about access key ID. The access key ID which I have is this, and the secret. So the secret, the region is the US East one. I have it, and that's it. So my AWS is configured. Okay. So now I am going to access the S3 through the AWS CLI. We will discuss this in the next class when we use the AWS CLI. This is I just wanted to show you how you can copy the data. Okay. So now I configured the AWS CLI. So I'm going to use the AWS commands. AWS, if I do help, it is going to give me all the options available for the AWS command. AWS, I chose S3, so dash dash help, and then what? It is not giving. Okay, AWS S3 copy. I'm copying the data. I think it's AWS copy. I need to check that I forgot the command. I think it is just AWS copy command. Okay, so AWS S3, it has a command called ls. It is going to give you the list of buckets you have access to. Okay, so now if you want to copy some file into this bucket, so let me create one file, abc.txt. I have this file here on this machine. I am going to copy this, copy abc.txt, where I want to copy s3 colon slash slash. Let me just check it is right or not. Inside the HR directory. Yeah, that is not the right command. So let me do the S3 copy. Yeah, colon slash slash. Oh, this is how I need to S3 copy. Okay. AWS S3 copy abc.txt, copy it into,
Lokesh,
yeah.
already you uploaded one file, right?
Mhm.
Again, we should do abc.text.
Yes, it will copy the abc.txt will be uploaded to this location. Now let's go ahead and see it here. So I am in the HR now. I'll refresh this page. So I'm expected to see 2. Oh, why it is going to upload? See, now I see the abc.txt file here available. So I uploaded this through the UI and I uploaded this through the CLI. So when you want to copy the data, so we need to use the AWS CLI command to copy the data to our S3 locations. So we will discuss this AWS CLI in next class. I just wanted to show you how the way of downloading the data from another services. Okay, so this is what we do for the S3. So now let's talk about the tiers in this. We didn't discuss about tier, right? So now I'm going to create a policy for this. I go to the S3. You see the managements here. So let's talk about this first, properties. So properties of your object. So bucket versioning, server access logging, we disabled this all everything. CloudTrail, event notifications. If you want to have the event notification, like whenever someone deletes the data, you want to get notified, you can also add here. Object log we discussed. Static website hosting, you see, static website hosting. So you can also host your website using the S3 bucket. So you don't need to have a VM, you don't need to have the load balancer, everything. So you can use the S3 to host the website as well. So you want to see the website hosting. Now we need to edit the policy. So we blocked all the options, right? So we need to edit the public access for that. I'm enabling this option, static websites. So we need to provide the index.html. If you want to create the error as well, error you can, no, not required. I saved it. So I saved the settings for my website. So this is my website now. HTTP lokesh.kamale s3 amazon.com. So if I access this, it is going to give me my website, but we don't have the file over there. But let's see what happens here. It says forbidden, because remember when we are creating the S3, we blocked all the public access, right? So now I am going to remove that option. I will remove that and give full access. So I'm going to permissions. So we blocked all the public access. I'll edit this and I will unblock this and save the changes. I need to confirm this operation because it's very sensitive. Now let's access. So I will, this error message disappeared, but it gives me different error message. Let's see what is that. It's taking some time, I think. I removed the public access, right? This is policy. We don't need the policy. Yeah, we have here access control list as well. So let me edit this one. We need to enable the anonymous read access. Authenticated user groups, everyone, public access. So we need to give the read access to them. Come on. Let me give the, what is still saying the red mark here? Yeah, it says 404 not found, sorry, not forbidden,
Yeah.
right? It's 404 not found because what the issue is now, we don't have the index file copied. So now I'm going to create the index file and then copy it over. So I'm in the machine. I'll create my index.html hosted in S3. So I'm going to copy this AWS S3, copy index.html into S3 bucket in the root directory. So copy is successful. Now let's refresh this. But I need to grant access at the file level as well. Go to the objects, index file, access control list. Everyone can read the data. So now I saved it. See, I got my website. So you can also host. So now if you can give this website link, everyone can access your website. It is going to be a static website. When I say static, the contents are constant. It doesn't change. You just want to display some information. Let's suppose if someone try to access your website, you have moved from one endpoint to another endpoint. So in that case, you don't need to run the complete right. So you can simply say that this website has been moved to a different location. That information, show information, maybe status information. Status means you want to see whether the my web page is up or not. So we can verify the status page for Google also. So we have a status dashboard here. So they will show the information whether when it is up or not. All this. It is like a status, right? It doesn't change. It's a static. So that information we can host websites also. Static contents. So that's about your hosting websites. So now let me talk about the tiers. So now we have the data, right? So whatever data we are storing. So this data information we need to retain because we need to keep it for longer period and also for less cost. So always S3 is I mean, if you take any service from the AWS, they are always charged, right? Each and every resource is charged. So now we wanted to think a bit smart and reduce the cost usage. To do that, we need to work on the management lifecycle rules. Remember, we discussed this about lifecycle management in the snapshot. So when we want to create the snapshots, we enable the lifecycle policy where the snapshot will automatically be created and be deleted for after a certain amount of age or the count. Here I'm also creating the lifecycle rules here. First lifecycle rule. So you can say anything. S3 rule, you can just say. So limit the scope of this rule using one or more filters. Yes, you can do. You can do applies to all objects. It depends how you want to retain. So you may be having multiple folders, right? You only want to keep the folder in this policy, but here I'm just using all. Okay. So what is the lifecycle rules here? So transition current version of objects between storage classes. Okay. Transitions previous versions, not previous versions. Expire current versions of objects now. Permanent deleted. So let's keep only this one. So you can choose based on your things. So you just wanted to retain the deleted objects. So if someone deletes it from S3, you want to keep that object in someone else before it gets permanently deleted from the S3. Because someone say, I wanted to retrieve the deleted one. How do you retrieve this? By creating this management policy. But in this case, I'm just currently using the current version. So you can also retrieve the previous versions also. So if you have Excel file, if someone edited that, you just want to keep the newer version. What about the older version? You want to keep the older version in somewhere else because older versions less people accessing is less chances, right? That's fine. So now I'm just using on this one. What is the storage tier? So currently they have these many storage: standard IA, intelligent tiering, one zone IA, glacier, deep archive. So these are transactions. The standard IA means this is like standard one. Okay, so it is going to keep your data in standard IA, means they may be giving you 99.99 accessibility. It's always up and running. So you want to keep the data for 30 days here. So after 30 days, what should I do? You can add another transition. You then move it to intelligent tiering. So you are keeping it here for another 15 days. Okay, and then another transition. So one zone, it is only available at one availability zone. Okay, so how you want to keep it? Keep it there for another 15 days. I think it's 30 minimum, is not the 30 days. And then what should I do? So after that, move it to glacier. So how many days you want me to keep it here in the glacier? Keep it permanent. So what it is doing is, so now I have a statement file. I kept the statement files. Maybe I have a 10 statement file, let's say, and maybe let's talk about the movie. Okay, so let's think Netflix is using the S3 in backend to keep the movies. Okay, so if a new movie is released, what are the chances of people seeing that movie? Everyone try to access it, right, immediately. So you will keep it there for 30 days. After 30 days, how many people will watch that movie again? Maybe on the release date, 90% people watch that movie. So after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the count reduces, right? So after 1 month, mostly everyone watches the movie. So only few people will still watch it, right? So the percentage will drastically go down to 40%. So now we have 40% only. Just to satisfy 40% traffic, are you going to pay more money? No. That's why you move that movie file to the intelligent tiering. So you keep it there for 30 days. So now 2 months is over. Do you think after 2 months people will still watch that movie? Of course, yes. But what is the percentage of the movie people watching? Maybe less, 10%. So again, do you really want to keep in intelligent tiering, which is the less price? So this standard one, maybe $100. This one is $50. So you really want to keep it on $50 tier? No, I'll keep it in less low tier. So this is $20 rate. So you are going to put the file in a $20 pricing rate location. This will give you only one zone. So you will have availability in one zone. So after 30 days, 3 months, what are the chances of movie watching? Yes, people still watch the movie, right? But maybe 5%, 4%, maybe 0%, we don't know. So what do? We need to keep the file, but the access is on demand. Only the new movies, the latest movies will show up in a new releases, right? But as the age grows, the movie goes back because new movies keep on adding, right? So now I'm going to keep it in a 90 days here. So after maybe you can keep it here for 1 year, 360 days, 365. So after that, what am I going to do? Completely deep archive it. You can deep archive it. So this is the part. So now, so for 30 days, I'm going to pay $100. So after moving 30 days, I'm going to reduce my pricing. I don't want to continue in same. So less demand, so less quality. So you are going to keep it in this tier. You are going to give this tier, and this tier. This is how the life cycle management works. Got my point? So if you talk about a movie, it's the best example. The only latest trending should made accessible immediately. So even in YouTube or Facebook, people try to watch the latest trending ones than the old ones. People may still go back to watch old ones, but the chances are less. The percentage of the viewers are less. So you don't need to maintain them the quick access. So you can keep them accessible, but with less speed. Or it may take some time to retrieve the data. That's absolutely fine. Okay, this is all about. Clear? Any doubts on this? So we have a tiring here. Goes here, goes here, and goes here. So this is
So
actually a tier. Yeah.
as a DevOps engineer, will be I mean, like
We
we
will.
will be archiving the
Yes.
uh,
It
S3
depends.
objects.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually purely it depends upon the usage. So what we generally do, right, as a DevOps engineer, we just create the S3 buckets, and then we give them the access. Or we may also control the access as well. But what the data and how the data they want to control, the team will take care of that. Whoever team is using that. If they don't have knowledge on that, then we recommend them this policy. So what is your data type? Do you really want to keep in a frequently accessed data or infrequently accessed data or the glacier model? So if we talk about the files, so we have some files that we need to keep it for the company purposes. So the users may access the reports monthly. So you keep the monthly reports available in the S3 bucket in the standard tier. So after a month, after 1 month is over, the users will always look for the new month reports. The previous month reports are rarely used. Maybe they use it for the comparison. So you keep them in a IA. What is the next year? Okay, so
Interesting.
after 2 months, you are going to keep them. You are going to keep the old files in a IA, which is a one zone IA. It's only available in one availability zone. Okay, so they can compare it. So after 3 months, they may look for quarterly report. Yes, you can still keep it. So after quarterly reports, they don't look at it, but they may look at the month reports, yearly reports. So they may ask you to generate the report for all the months. So you still need to retrieve that. You can keep them in a glacier. So after 1 year
Okay.
is over, they don't usually look back. They don't even they don't ask for previous year reports at all. But there is a US government policy that whenever the audit happens, they should be in a position to show all the reports to them for the auditors. It may or may not happen, but we should maintain that according to the rule. It's a mandatory. So for that, you don't need to keep them in a standard tier, which is $100 cost, right? It's too expensive. And usage is 0. So in that case, you are going to do the deep archive. So they are going to keep them in a completely deep archive. So this will be retrieved when you ask for it. So you are going to do the life cycle like this. So there's if in S3, they may also ask you the questions. So how it is going to, how can I effectively maintain my money when use the S3? Yes, definitely you can use by using the life cycle management. What is the life cycle management? So we are going to keep the frequently accessed files, the most important files in a standard tier. So after we know that these files are not being accessed continuously based on the age, so we can move those files to a different folder like intelligent tier. And then after that, if we really don't want to, again the access, the demand is less, we can move them to one zone IA. Again, the demand is less, we can move to glacier. If there is no demand, but we need to retrieve whenever required, then we need to archive them completely. This is what the currently I applied for entire bucket, but this typically we enable this per folder basis or per file basis. Okay, so you add the tag. So whichever file or the folder has the tag, that tag will be considered for the archives. This policy. So you can, this is not standard. It's completely use case. So there may be some files, so which should be accessible all the time. Maybe in Netflix accounts. So user accounts. So user may log in every day, right? May not, but definitely log in every day at least. You have to keep it accessible for them. So you can keep their information in the standard AI forever. It depends. So the files which are not required, which are the demand is less based on the age grows, then you rotate them. Okay, so that's about the policies. So now let's talk about another thing here. Access points. Access points, I don't know. I'm not sure about these access points. Uh, the S3 is actually works in two ways. So here in the permission side, we have the policy on the bucket, so which applies to entire bucket, and then we have a ACL, access control list. Similarly, this is exactly similar to our security group and the network access control list, right? Even though you have full access from security group, your NACL still can control it. Similarly, you have a bucket policies where you can configure the access at the bucket level, and then you can granularly manage your objects as well. Because now I have a finance folder and the HR folder. I have 4 resources. So 4 resources, one is working for finance, remaining 3 is working for the HR. So both should have access to all of them should have access to bucket, but finance person should only have access to finance folder, and the remaining 3 people should have access to only HR folder. So we can control this through the ACL and the policies. So we can write those. It's been a while I didn't write, so I may probably need to check that. So we can control that one as well here. Okay, so that's all about this S3 and the glitch here. So any doubts on this?
Lokesh, if you mention like NACL, we should not mention here ACL, right?
Here ACL, this is called ACL, access control list. So NACL, network access control list. So that works on the network level. This ACL means it's like a standard object, is name, it's a letter acronym, access control list. So you can apply to any resource. So S3 also provides that feature where you can control access to particular user, particular group. So any doubts on this?
So like in real life, like when we have a up and running website, so we are dividing it into modules and then storing it in different S3 buckets and then creating the policies, is it?
Yes. So usually when we have the website application, so you would be keeping all the data inside the database, right? So in case if it is files, so maybe some people try to access the files. So that files you can generate on demand from the database itself, or you can have them pre-generated and you refer the PDFs directly that are stored in your S3. So that it completely a developer's choice how you wanted to do that. So for as a DevOps engineer, we only ensure that we make sure that we give them access that he needed.
Okay. Access to that particular S3 bucket, is it?
Yes, S3 buckets are folders.
Okay.
Okay, any more doubts? Okay, cool. So we have completed the S3 and the RDS. So you guys can practice this. The next class, I'm going to discuss on the IAM and the AWS CLI. Okay, on the Saturday, IAM is very important. So when you join the company, you may not have access to IAM just because we are the root account. We can see all the services, we can access everything, but in the company, you may be restricted. You may not even get the access to AWS console. You may do everything through the CLIs, or you may be restricted to perform only few actions, not everything. That we will do through the IAM. I will discuss that in the next class. Okay, cool. So just do practice on this and let me know in case if you get any doubts. Okay, thanks guys. Have a remaining nice Sunday.